Hey, and welcome back to my channel where I experiment with different materials and techniques. In this video we will be tanning a fox hide for taxidermy. Now, I have only tanned something once, and that was years ago under a museum taxidermist supervision, so I feel very intimidated by this project. In theory, I know what to do, but there are some details that I'm missing, and to complicate things a bit more, I'm not going to tan this hide by the traditional method, which is fleshing, salting, pickling and tanning, but I will be using Krowtann 2000, which is a product that claims that I can skip the salting part altogether and do the pickling and tanning at the same time. This sounds very interesting, and according to a lot of professional taxidermists, they have been using this product successfully for years, so let's give it a go. So I chose to use Krowtann 2000 and follow the instructions religiously to ensure that I did everything correctly. Now, firstly, the instructions that came with the bottle are slightly different from what I found from the web, mainly the web version having more detailed instructions. However, both of the instructions just said to roughly flesh the skin before putting it in the solution and doing a final fleshing after the skin has been neutralized, which is the last step of this chemical process. I don't know what a roughly fleshed fox in this case should look like. I know you shouldn't have chunks of flesh or fat on the skin before putting it in the pickle, because the tissue prevents the pickle from penetrating deep enough, but I had no idea if I still had to remove something from the hide or if it was good to go. I didn't want to spend too much time on fleshing the fox because I had already been working on it for hours, and I was very scared that the warmth had already caused some damage to the ears that are very prone for hair slippage. So I thought that at least I should perform a proper degreasing for the skin before I mix the tanning solution. Here I'm using Kemsol, that is a solvent type degreaser. The instructions are very vague, saying that you should mix 1 part Kemsol degreaser to 2 up to 20 parts water depending on degreasing needs. I started with the 1 to 20 part solution in mind, but I think that in the end I probably added more of the degreaser. I let it sit in the solution for an hour and then washed the hide in clear water. The hide is not as pink anymore and the water was very dirty, so I think that the degreaser did a good job with removing a lot of grease and blood from the skin. Next, I mixed up the Krowtann solution, which called for 64 ounces of salt, which just seems so much at first because it looked like I couldn't even dissolve it to the 2.5 gallons of water. I'm also used to the metric system, so I was scared of using wrong measurements, but luckily the instructions specify that everything is by volume. I also chose to make the solution following the measurements for a deer cave because the amounts that they had for a fox just seemed too little. I'm happy I did that because later on there was noticeable evaporation despite me keeping the lid on all the time. Then lastly I added 8 ounces of Krowtann and mixed everything in very well. Do this in a well-ventilated area and always use proper gloves and eye protection. The instructions say to weigh the skin down with a milk jug that is filled with water and to lift the skin up every day and turn it around so that the solution can get to every crevice. The instructions say not to have any folds on the skin, but since the fox was case-skinned, I couldn't get it completely flat, so I went and turned the skin around twice a day. I kept the skin in the solution for 4 days and now it had turned into this grayish color. The instructions say that the skin is tanned when it is white and feels like a wet dish towel, so I googled what a pickled deer cape looks like, and in many sources the deer skin comes out of the pickle looking a bit grey, and then they would thin the hide before they brushed the tanning solution on, and once the hide was thin, the skin was actually white. So I was hoping that maybe this is what the fox skin is supposed to look like at this stage. I pulled the hide out and washed it in clear water. While the skin was sitting in that bucket, I neutralized the Krowtann solution with sodium bicarbonate, aka baking soda, and once the pH strip indicated that the solution was neutral, I could pour it down the drain. I then mixed the neutralizing solution. It looks like I'm pouring 4 ounces of baking soda to 1.5 gallons of water, so I probably used the measurements recommended for a fox skin. I let the skin neutralize for 10 minutes. Apparently this is the time when you would start seeing a lot of hair floating in the water if your skin was not handled properly before the tanning process, but luckily I didn't see anything. Once the skin was neutralized, I washed it in a mixture of Tide and water. There were no measurements for this step, so I used as much as I thought I would need. At this point I turned the skin hair side out too. Then I washed it in clear water and let it dry for 2 hours. Next, the instructions say to do the final fleshing, which in my case seemed to be just the face and then some very thin connective tissue here and there. I used a skive knife and a fleshing beam to do this. I suppose this part is mainly to get the skin thin enough so that when you mount it, it doesn't shrink too much and you will also be able to catch more details with it. At this point there was no slippage. I had split the tip of the tail so the solution was able to penetrate the skin there, and even the ears seemed to hold up very well. I hope this video was helpful or at least somewhat interesting. If you want to know how the hair holds up once I start mounting the skin, please hit the subscribe button and check out my next video where I get to mount this fox. Thank you for watching and happy crafting!